We are live with Christina Gilbertson of Gilbertson Law Office to talk about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It was signed into law by President Trump last night, and this impacts pretty much every single small business out there. So we thought we would get our wonderful, brilliant, kind friend Christina to join us on Facebook Live to discuss this act and how it applies to small businesses around the country. So Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I know that right now is a scary time for a lot of business owners out there. And there's a lot of questions about how things are going to turn out, and a lot of panics happening, across both in personal lives and in the business world. And so I think that this Families First Coronavirus Response Act is something that is hopefully going to alleviate at least some of those concerns, both for employers and the employees. And just kind of jumping right in there. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to the act, but the ones I'm really going to focus on pertain to the emergency paid sick leave aspect, and then also the expansion of the FMLA leave provisions. So, as Rihanna said, it went into effect, or he signed it last night. It goes into effect on April 2nd, and it will remain in effect until December 31st of 2020. And it's going to apply, these changes in the act applies to all employers with fewer than 500 employees. And so, as you mentioned, that's most of our Colorado businesses for sure, and a lot of other small businesses across the country. That said, if you're a business that has 50 or fewer employees, there's a potential that you may be able to be deemed exempt from the act. The process for how that's going to actually happen for you to get that exemption is still kind of up in the air. The Secretary of Labor is still kind of developing things. There's going to be different notice documents and different guidelines that are going to be coming out between now and April 2nd, and possibly even after that. So there's a lot of questions that are still up in the air, but I think what we have right now is a good framework and understanding of generally where things are going to be going.
Can you give us an overview of these two major provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and just let everybody know what we're looking at?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, basically there are 6 general qualifiers that would allow an employee to take paid sick leave if they're unable to work. And that includes unable to work remotely. And the 6 qualifying reasons are: first, the employee is subject to a quarantine or isolation because they have COVID-19. Secondarily, they've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine just due to concerns related to COVID. Importantly, it does not apply to self-imposed quarantine without medical advice. So you want to make sure that you understand that your employees, they do need to have medical advice to be quarantined, and just saying that they're not comfortable with being at work doesn't necessarily make them qualify for the paid sick leave under the act as it's currently drafted. The third qualifier is that the employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is also seeking a medical diagnosis. So that in hand with the recent temporary thing that we were dealing with. Employees were going to get 4 days worth of paid time off while they're waiting for clarification if they actually have the virus or not. So this is kind of an expansion on that. So those are the first 3, and those are kind of lumped together as one. I'll get to it in a minute, but there's the first 3 are kind of lumped together. The fourth qualifying reason is if the employee is caring for an individual. It doesn't have to be a family member, but you want to have it. It needs to be somebody that's close to you, because that person is either been isolated by medical directive, or they've been advised to self-quarantine again because the doctor has told them to do so. So instead, it's caring for someone else. The fifth is if you're an employee caring for for their child because their school has been closed. Obviously, in Colorado, we now know that our kids are going to be out of school at least until April 17th. Quite possibly, there's a lot of rumbling out there that it's going to be canceled for the rest of the year, so we'll have to see. But I know that's a big cause for concern for a lot of parents out there, myself included. I've got 2 kids that, now figuring out how to juggle work and being a homeschool teacher liaison, it's going to be a trying time. And so this is aiming to give those types of people a little bit of room to breathe a little bit. And then the sixth one is kind of an amorphous qualifier. And that is if the employee is experiencing any other substantially similar condition that is to be specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And that's pretty much what it says. And it says the precise meaning of this will be clarified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So honestly, I don't know what that means yet, but I think that they're looking at it saying, okay, yeah, you don't necessarily have the virus, but maybe there's something similar, maybe something is mutating, there's some other kind of issue. They want to make sure that they're expanding it to cover folks like that as well, as my understanding. But that's, again, this is one of those really amorphous parts of the act right now that we're dealing with, and a lot more information will be coming.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know that's probably not as helpful as one would hope, but I think they're trying to keep it pretty broad right now and clarify things as time goes on.
Well, it's probably not a bad thing considering that we really don't know what's on the horizon. So we do need to leave a little bit of an open door just in case.
Right.
So, so do these qualifiers apply to both the FMLA part and the sick leave part, or is this just the FMLA?
This part is the sick leave part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the FMLA, we'll get to that in a minute, and that one's a little bit different, and it's a little bit different. But this one, this sick leave, it applies to both your full-time employees and your part-time employees. For full-time employees, they can receive up to 80 hours of paid sick leave. And a part-time employee can receive the equivalent of the number of hours they would work on average during a 2-week period. So if you have somebody that works an average of 20 hours a week, then they would be able to get up to 40 hours of paid sick leave. Okay. And so as if that wasn't quite confusing enough, there are also limits and differences in the amount of money that you can earn as sick pay, depending on your qualifying reason. So remember I said there were 6 different reasons, 6 qualifiers that qualify you to get the paid sick leave. The first 3 are essentially if it's the employee themselves that is experiencing problems. And the second set of 3 is essentially if you're caring for somebody else, or you may be experiencing something that sort of looks like the virus, but is not the virus. And so if you're qualifying because you yourself are experiencing issues, or you are showing symptoms, or you've been quarantined, then you can receive up to a maximum of $511 per day or $5,110 total. Now, if you're qualifying because you're caring for someone else under the last half of the qualifiers, you can receive a maximum of $200 per day or $2,000 total. So definitely a difference there as to whether it's you specifically or if you're caring for someone else. And I think the rationale behind that is if it's you that's having symptoms, or you that's being quarantined, it's obviously impacting you 100%. Whereas if you're caring for someone else, theoretically, there might be somebody else that's also helping to care for those people and help them. So maybe you can kind of shift the burden a little bit and kind of share that a little. But that's where things currently stand, that you've got the 2 different tiers there, just depending on what is qualifying you for the sick leave.
Okay. And that applies to part-time folks as well. Even that cap, that $500 or $5,000 cap, what is it?
$5,110 total. I don't know how they came up with these dollar amounts because there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Right. So that cap even applies to part-time employees as well?
Correct. And one thing that's good is that the Secretary of Labor is going to be issuing guidelines to assist employers in calculating leave benefits for their employees by April 2nd. So we still have a couple of weeks now before these go into effect. And like I said, there's going to be a lot more information coming down the pike. And that's one piece of it for sure.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
We'll keep an eye out for that.
All right. So this goes into effect 14 days from now?
April 2nd. So yeah, I think
April
that's
2nd.
right. Yep.
Whew, that's right around the corner.
Right. Yes.
Whew, okay.
And employees can only begin using the sick time on April 2nd. So if something happens between now and April 2nd, then they would need to be using their PTO or other accommodations, things like that. This act doesn't apply until that April 2nd date.
Okay. Good to know.
Right. And then, but once April 2nd hits, a key distinguishing factor is that employers can't require their employees to use their accrued PTO that they already have. So this act is an addition to whatever PTO that your company provides for the employees. And that's a big difference, so that a lot of people may not realize.
Okay. So what if they exhaust the sick leave that's underneath this act? Then can they start tapping into their own PTO that they've already accrued throughout the year?
Yes, they can do that. And then they can also step into the expansion of the FMLA side of things, which we'll get into.
All right. Is that a good segue for you?
That's perfect. Yes. So most of us are familiar with FMLA, and it allows folks to care for family members or themselves if they have an extended sickness or illness or problem they need to deal with. Under normal circumstances, the FMLA only applies to companies that have 50 or more employees. And there's some other qualifiers in there, but the differences here that we're dealing with are normally it's 50 or more employees, and an employee has to have worked for the company a minimum of 1,250 hours for the company in the preceding 12 months. So this is something you have had to have been with the company for a good period of time, working for them regularly in order to qualify for FMLA. Under the expanded FMLA side of things, it applies to any company that has less than 500 employees. So whether you have 3 employees or 499 employees, at first glance, this applies to you. And it also applies to any employee that has worked for the company for 30 days, 30 or more days. So obviously it's a significant difference there. And again, it's a changing time and we don't know what's on the horizon. And we know that people, it's a scary time. So the government's doing what they can to help everybody and get those employees protected. And you do, importantly, that to keep in mind, and we mentioned this earlier, is if you are a small business and having these new guidelines in place where you're paying your employees for extended periods of time, if that's really going to be detrimental to your business, and it really may end up with you closing your doors, you can apply for an exemption and hopefully get some relief from that. Again, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but there is an escape hatch there under some soon to be determined qualifying checklists there.
Are there, in the original FMLA, there are hours requirements in order to be eligible for FMLA. You said the 30 days of employment, and I'm assuming that's calendar days, but are there any hours requirements? Do they have to work so many hours in order to qualify?
Not that I have seen. Again, this may be something that gets kind of fleshed out a little bit more, but my understanding is that as long as they've worked for you for 30 plus days, they would qualify here. And the thing is that to keep in mind, under the extended FMLA, then they can take up to 12 weeks of leave if they're unable to work, including working remotely. And it includes if they have to care for their child whose school has been closed. So that's something, typically FMLA is limited to you have a baby, or if you're caring for a sick parent or somebody that, that is sick, just having no childcare is not typically is something that is covered under FMLA. So this is specifically expanded to help in the situation that we're all dealing with right now, with at least another month of no childcare for a lot of our children. Yeah. And this kind of picks up where the paid sick leave that we talked about earlier, you're capped at that $2,000. cap out at that $2,000 and then jump into your FMLA side of things. And that kind of, from the employee side perspective, that kind of protects them and gives them a little bit further peace of mind there.
So there's a 10-day waiting period on this FMLA piece. So the employee goes out and they qualify underneath, whether having to care for themselves or someone else with coronavirus or the illness, or caring for their child due to these circumstances. They have to wait 10 days of unpaid time, but that sick time that we just discussed can come in and fill that gap there, right?
That's how I read it. That's my understanding, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, if the employee does have some accrued PTO time, then if say they've got that, then they can use that accrued PTO time during that 10-day period as well. So it's different ways. It's kind of stacking to some extent. And so you just want to make sure that, again, there's going to be guidelines on the calculation of benefits and everything that the Department of Labor is going to be coming out with. So definitely employers are going to want to understand what those are, making sure that they're talking to folks like yourself and their attorneys and whatnot to make sure that they're understanding what their requirements are and making sure that they're giving people the appropriate amount of benefits and coverage that they're entitled to here.
Okay, so once that 10-day waiting period is over, employers need to pay employees during that 12-week period of time.
Yes, but they will pay 2/3 of the normal wages for the number of hours the employee would be regularly scheduled to work. So again, if you've got a 20-hour employee, then you'd be paying them 2/3 of their wages for 20 hours a week. Again, this does have a cap on it as well under the FMLA, where it's a maximum of $200 per day or $10,000 in total. So,
whew.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers thrown out there, a lot of things to keep in mind, but.
Yeah, absolutely. So with both of these, this is a big financial, I hate to say it, but burden for small businesses. I mean, a lot of us small business owners are, operating on a shoestring budget and having, let's face it, business is down for all of us. Clients, customers aren't coming in, they're not buying. We're all stuck at home, so our hands are tied. We can't buy, right?
Right.
So that revenue is not coming in, but yet employees need to be paid, even if they're not working underneath these provisions. Is there anything in place to help these small businesses financially?
Yes. First and foremost, under the Families First Act, then you will get a tax credit. But you're going to have to wait a year for that. And that's not going to be good news for most of our business owners. But there are also things in the works in terms of small business loans, whether it's through the SBA or government's working on different things. So there are going to be some avenues out there for small businesses to be able to comply with these regulations and have employees that are hopefully will be able to come back once things die down a little bit and it's not so scary for everybody and we understand where things are going to go. But it's a lot up in the air and there's a lot of that's definitely something you want to make sure that you're looking at different options out there. Reaching out to your local SBDCs are a great resource for this kind of thing. They definitely have their finger on the pulse of what's going on. So definitely pay attention to that and just kind of keep an eye out. I mean, things are going to be changing and it's funny because I've had a number of clients ask me about how things are affecting them today and or what was affecting them on Monday. And it's a little bit different than now, and it's not something that tomorrow it may be a completely different, another spin on something. So this is a very much evolving time right now. And so we have to just do our best to kind of buckle down and make good decisions. Try not to panic too much. I know there's a lot of talk right now about mass layoffs. I know you addressed that yesterday in your blog, and that's hopefully the point of this act and similar things that are going on right now is to hopefully alleviate some of those knee-jerk reactions that a lot of us are having right now, because it's scary, but we'll weather it and we'll get through it. It's just going to take some time and patience and flexibility for sure.
Definitely. How do you see this impacting small businesses the most?
Oh, I think I really my fear is that it's going to scare a lot of small business owners away. That people are going to see, you know, this is a scary thing, and it's maybe viewed as insurmountable. You know, a lot of people are like, you know, like you said, people aren't out there buying services and doing things, and meanwhile you've got Amazon and the grocery stores that are hiring. I fear that a lot of people might jump ship and kind of go to those bigger corporations that maybe at least on the outside kind of look more stable, and whether that's employees or the owners, you know, I mean, it could go both ways. And so I think we are already dealing with difficulties in the workforce, certainly in Colorado and in a lot of other areas as well. And I think this is just going to make it that much worse.
Absolutely. If you could give one piece of advice to these small business owners out there during these difficult times and in light of, you know, the Family First Act, what advice would you give them?
Definitely don't try to go it alone. I know there's so much information out there, and sometimes it seems conflicting, and some of the stuff is very nuanced. Make sure you're getting out there, you're getting help, you're asking questions. There's so many people out there who are ready, willing, and able to help, whether it's a free resource like the SBDC, or if you have a wonderful person like Rihanna that can help you with your employee questions, or anybody out there. Just know that you don't have to do it alone, and make sure that you're getting good advice. That's key right now, because with things changing the way that they are, like I said, what you heard this morning may not be true tomorrow morning. So just make sure that you're paying attention, but don't get overwhelmed by it all. Take one day at a time.
That's great advice, Christina. Is there anything else we need to know about the Families First Act that we haven't discussed yet?
Let's see. There are some issues that talk about with the FMLA. Part of it is, you know, when your 12 weeks is up, your job is held for you. And that does still apply technically under the expanded FMLA. So if you have if you're an employer that has 25 or more employees, then the return to the same or equivalent position still stands. If you are an employer with 25 or fewer than 25 employees, then the returning employee is entitled to reinstatement when they come back, unless that position no longer exists due to economic conditions or changes in the operating conditions caused by the virus in this situation. And if that's the case and the position no longer exists, the employer needs to make reasonable efforts to restore the employee to an equivalent position. And if they are unable to do so, then they have to keep in contact with that former employee at that point, for up to a year, in case a position then comes available. And so I'm not sure how that's going to work in practice, because things kind of change, and kind of keeping track of people, and you have to make reasonable efforts to contact your employee to say, hey, you have a job back. Do you want to come back? And I understand where they're trying to go with that, but I feel like in practice might be kind of difficult to actually adhere to. But just wanted to throw that out there, that we do have that is kind of a piece of the puzzle, and also for the employees to know that there is an attempt to try to maintain the status quo when all of this is over.
Yeah, that's great input. If you don't mind, I have a question here that was posted from my friend Brandy Nunez. She says, I got a call from a client about a layoff that still allows some limited earnings and unemployment collection while employees are off. Can you enlighten? So
they're going to be doing a layoff, but there's some unemployment tied to it as well. Is that?
I think what she's asking about is pretty much how a work share or job attached type of layoff would apply. So work share, where they've got limited hours at work, their hours were cut, and they are still able to receive unemployment benefits. Are you able to speak to that? I can talk to it too.
That I'm not sure on that one. So if that's something that you've seen, then I will hand it back to you for that part.
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely talk about it briefly. Yes, Brandy, I will post a link to my blog. I actually just wrote a blog on this very topic about layoffs and the different categories of layoffs. There is a work share program through the Colorado Department of Labor, and they even have some information if you go to their website on the work share program. And so that's pretty much cutting their hours, but they are still eligible to receive a portion of unemployment benefits. You can also look at a job attached layoff, which essentially is no hours worked, but with the intention of having that employee return to work after a brief separation. They won't be required to look for another job as they're collecting unemployment. So those are great options that are available. So it looks like we were able to answer her question. Great. Thanks, Brandy. Workshare is it. So if you need additional details, Brandy, give me a call. We can work through that together. Christina, you have been so gracious and kind with your time. I just thank you so much. You're such a great community leader, legal, brilliant guru mind. I just appreciate everything you do for us. If none of you small business owners have had the chance to work with Christina in some form, I know I recommend her all the time to my clients. She's wonderful. She also works with local SBDCs. I think you're qualified throughout the whole entire state, aren't you?
I'm qualified. Right now I'm only working with the Pikes Peak division.
Okay.
But we'll see if that expands a little bit, certainly.
Well, I know you do great things for our community. Christina, do me a favor and tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they have more questions.
Sure. You can reach me at Christina at gilbertsonlawoffice.com is my email. Website is gilbertsonlawoffice.com, or you can give me a call, 720-525-9275. I work with a lot of small businesses across the state, really focusing on the Denver, South Denver down to the Springs area, and I've been doing a lot of remote work since I started, so this is nothing new to me. I've got the resources so I can help my folks, and I like to work with small businesses so that they can afford their costs, and I do things a little bit differently, and I'd love to tell you a little bit more about how that works.
Christina, I know how you do things differently, and it's wonderful how you've shaken up your industry, and you're just providing small businesses such wonderful services and support in every area that they need. So again, thank you for what you do, and thank you for spending time with me today on this Facebook Live. HR Branches community, we're here to support you. We're going to continuously feed information your way as we receive it. But as Christina said, it's changing on a daily, if not hourly basis. So what we say today may change tomorrow. So just bear with us. We are in uncharted territory, but we are making this happen. Also know that HR Branches is extending a free 1-hour consult to anybody and everybody, all small business owners, to help you plan through these turbulent times. If you have any questions or if you need anything, reach out to us and we are here to help you. I promise that 1-hour consult will not be a sales pitch. It will be solely focused on solving your problems and your answers. Christina, do you offer any consults?
I do. I do a 30-minute consult for any small business, and we'll get you squared away from a legal perspective for sure.
Perfect. That will help our small business community so much. So reach out to Christina with any legal questions. Reach out to HR Branches with any people questions. Until next time, we will be coming live to you as soon as we find out information. We'll be pushing out blogs. So thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.